You know, we like seeing smiles on people's face, so that means you like your intro.
Heck yeah. Jamming.
Yeah, thumbs up. We want to welcome Miss Holly to Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast, and we're going to continue to share life experiences. Because I'm gonna tell you what I loved about Holly. She was like, "Oh yeah, I've been watching y'all. I definitely want to come on." So, thank you for supporting us, Holly. We truly appreciate it.
You bet.
If you can come up and tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then as you know, City Sid is going to kick off that first question.
All right. Sounds great. Thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor. So I'm Holly Doherty, and I'm an author, speaker, and trauma-informed self-worth coach. And what I really do is help women to let go of the emotional baggage that keeps them stuck and help them radiate confidence so they can go after their dreams and set their world on fire. And my work has really stemmed from the lessons that I've learned growing up and through my life that we're going to talk about on this podcast. So you'll get to hear all about it.
Well, thank you for being here with us and being able to share your life experience. Hopefully, your story will touch some of our viewers here.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we always do like to start off at the beginning, so you can let us know, how was growing up like, what was the structure of your home, and did you suffer any traumas in your childhood years?
Well, I grew up in a typical middle class family, two parents, a brother, and a dog, and everything looked really perfect on the outside. Um, like I said, my family was together. I grew up in South Baltimore, in the city, and everything looked perfect on the outside, but on the inside, I was hiding a lot of secrets. Um, you talk about childhood trauma. To start off with, my family summered at a nudie camp, which that's a big secret for the whole family to keep because you can't exactly go tell, your fellow Boy Scout leaders and church friends and everything that, you ran around naked in the summer. But my mom had decided that she always wanted to swim without the feeling of a wet bathing suit on. And one of my dad's coworkers belonged to this camp. And somehow, I don't know how the conversation started, but they got invited to this thing and the rest is kind of naked history. So started off with that weird, bizarre secret that really set the stage for an obliteration of boundaries before I could even form them, and not really knowing what was appropriate, what wasn't. Those normal just boundaries that you have as a kid weren't there. And that really opened up the avenue for a girl actually in my neighborhood to sexually abuse me for years. And I don't know when it started. I was so young, I don't really remember a time in my life when it wasn't going on. My best guess is that it was about 6 years old because that was the time, back in the late 70s, early 80s, where the latchkey kids, where you just, thrown outside all day long. Your parents told you to come back in when the street light turned on. So not a ton of parental supervision. And she had me convinced that she was possessed by a devil, by a demon, and forced me to do things with her. And she threatened me that if I ever told anyone, she'd kill my dog, she'd kill my family, she'd kill, everyone that I loved and cared for. And so I kept this secret. Until I was in college, I didn't tell anyone about it because I believed her. When you're 6 and you get in trouble, you figure you did something wrong, right? When bad things happen, you figure you kind of did something wrong and deserved it. But I was so young when this started, when the abuse started. I, in my little 6-year-old brain, decided that I couldn't have done anything to deserve it. So I must deserve it because of who I am, like fundamentally at my core, worthless and unlovable. And I carried those lies around with me for years and years and years until I finally did some of the healing work to let it go.
Oh boy, I don't even know where to. I had to pause for a second because I don't even know where to start. So, I guess the first thing is your family vacation at a nude camp. And
Mhm.
was it just you as a child, or did you have siblings?
I have a brother who is 6 years older than me.
Uh-huh.
So it was the four of us. And then there was another family that they met there that they became really close friends with. And so it was kind of like the eight of us paddling around all summer long. And sometimes random Sundays in the winter because they had an indoor pool. And so where most families might have a Sunday dinner or a family car ride, we had a family skinny dip.
Okay, so they had kids too?
Yes. Yeah. Their kids were my brother's age. So a little bit older than me.
Oh boy. Okay.
Yeah.
So okay. So uh, did they do things in front of the kids, or it was just a nude camp?
It okay, so it was supposedly a family camp. You had to be married to belong. Um,
Uh-huh.
and there was outdoor recreation, there was swimming pools, there was tennis, there were shuffleboard courts. We had naked square dances. Um, I learned to dance, my slow dance by standing on the feet of a naked bald man who was really nice, by the way, a nice naked bald man, but still not, your typical. Most kids learn to slow dance, in a sixth grade dance with somebody their own age, fully clothed, and it was just weird. So there wasn't any like hanky panky going on that I knew about. Um, it was all very kind of, if you want to say clean, it was clean, but weird, really, really weird for a kid. I saw my brother and his friends go through puberty, like way wide out in the open. There were no secrets.
Well,
Yeah.
Hey.
now you would assume that a family that finds that to be okay are would be kind of open, especially about the birds and the bees and
Mhm.
how this works and what the proper name for that is.
Yep.
Um, Now, with that being said, what did that play a part in you maybe not knowing what was happening to you? When you were molested with the young lady,
Mhm.
or did that kind of give you a idea of what was actually going on? How did the I guess maybe two collide when
Yeah.
you probably should have been sexually educated? You would think one would be, to be nude a lot around
Right,
people.
right. And my mom is an RN. She's a nurse. And so everything was just very out in the open, matter of fact, like you said, proper names for things. Nothing was like cutified or anything like that. How did that play a role in what was going on? Yes, I absolutely knew what was going on in terms of what it was. But again, I think I was so young, like at 6, your brain just gets programmed in a way of what to expect. And I just learned to expect that that was kind of what I was around for. Um, like I said, I couldn't tell my parents out of a really credible, believable threat that she would kill them. Um, and because when you're 6, you still believe that a big fat red dude in a red suit flies around and delivers presents to everybody on Christmas Eve on a single night. You believe things. And when these threats were combined with such a profound violation of my body and my sovereignty, that has a big impact on what you believe and what you're able to really think through critically. I fully believe that if I had told my parents, they would have done something and put a stop to it. Because when I finally told them years and years later, when I was in college, they were stunned and they were, uh, you know, mortified that they didn't know and that they hadn't seen it. Um, so I believe that they would have put a stop to it. But like I said, I couldn't. My mouth was closed. I couldn't speak. I couldn't talk about it. I couldn't tell them.
Which is, for me, it's awkward because it's like they take y'all to nude camp, so you're exposed to body parts.
Hmm.
All I mean, looking at folks all the time.
Right.
So I wanted to ask, I don't understand how adults could be comfortable walking around kids without clothes on a new
Oh,
camp.
I know my
Uh,
parents weren't crazy either. Like they were this normal, typical, you know, middle class family. They looked perfectly normal. They're I don't know. They're not hippies. They're not crazy. It was just this weird thing that didn't make sense with any other part of who they are.
that's
I don't know.
crazy. So I was going to ask, did it traumatize you? I'm
Being at the
looking
camp,
just being at the camp. Yeah.
I didn't see it as traumatizing at the time,
Hmm.
um, because it was just, I don't know, just normal, just what we did. Um, Looking back, I see how really weird it was. And there was this one dude, his name was Cooey, and I always called him Ooey Cooey because I got, this just icky, awful feeling about him. And he always tried to bribe me to come into his house by offering me candy or books. Because I'm a big geek and I love to read. And even back then, um, other than that, so I just stayed away from him as much as possible. Um, like I said, I didn't see that part as traumatizing at the time. But now looking back, I'm going, okay, so like you said, I'm used to seeing body parts all around me and nakedness and all of this stuff. And probably, no doubt, when the abuse started happening with this gal, Lisa, I'm sure I didn't see it as anything really abnormal when the clothes started coming off, right? I don't remember how that ever happened, how we ever got to those naked moments in her basement, but I'm sure it didn't strike me as, whoa, this is wrong, put a stop to this, right? Because I was so conditioned to seeing it.
Understood.
Yeah.
Understood. Um, Now, was there ever a point, that you could remember yourself being like uncomfortable or just knowing something was off kind of as a child, or was there any point where you had the choice to go or not? How long was this period where this was a thing? How do you even find out about stuff like this? I feel like it's like an underground like information, like a pipeline that I have no idea about. Like,
Right.
how does that come about?
I don't know. I always wonder that. Like, were they standing around the coffee pot one day at work? And, I don't think cameras were allowed there. I never saw cameras. But, it really made me wonder, like, were they showing pictures? Were they just, how did that come up in conversation at work? And I know there wasn't a thing as such as, sexual harassment or anything in the 70s. So probably wasn't a big deal, as big a deal as it would be today. But, it was one of my dad's coworkers and they started chatting about it somehow. I still don't know how it came up. Um, so there wasn't really a chance or a time where I couldn't go, where I could choose not to go to the camp. There were parts of it I really loved. Like I loved the swimming. I lived in South Baltimore. We didn't have a pool. The neighborhood park pool was really kind of gross, and my parents didn't let me go to it. And so this was like my chance to swim, and I really loved that part. So it wasn't like it was all terrible. We got to eat out more often when we went down there than we ever did at home. And so there were really good parts of it, that I enjoyed as a kid. But looking back now, I'm going, that was really weird. And I would never, ever, ever, ever take my kids to a place like that. And I just wonder what went through, their heads. But I don't know. They didn't see anything wrong with it either, I suppose.
Mm-mm-mm. I was like, well, while we here, this is not my question, but did you ever ask them why did they do that?
Mhm. I did. I did. And the exact answer is what I told you. Like my mom always wanted to go swimming without the feel of a wet bathing suit to spoil the fun. And so they decided to try it.
Why
I
they ain't just try with themselves?
don't know. Exactly.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So I was gonna ask because I want to jump back into this. How was the girl that was taking advantage of you?
She was a couple years older than me. So my best guess is if I was 6, she was probably 10.
Ooh, that's young. Something must have been happening to her.
Yes.
That's why
Yeah.
she was on.
Looking
Something
back
had to be happening.
now, like there's no doubt. There's no doubt
Yeah,
in my mind that she was kind of acting out based on things that had happened to her. Yeah.
yeah. So I was gonna ask, how did you get in her basement?
Well, we started out as friends. You know, we're in Baltimore in the inner city, and everybody goes out into the alley, the back alley behind our houses to play. And we're out there all day long. You know, our parents kick us out of the house and say, come back when the streetlights come on. And we're just all out there playing. And so we'd go into each other's houses for snacks and watching TV and for, you know, all kinds of things. And so I'm sure that that just sort of was a natural extension of our outdoor play. Is the first time I ended up, you know, in her house as a friend. How it actually started the very first time, I have no idea. I don't have any memory of that.
Goodness.
Mm.
And what was it that I guess made you come to the realization of what was actually going on?
Oh gosh, I remember just being terrified every single time, being terrified. Um, you know, there were times where I would, you know, stare at the ceiling and count ceiling beams. And now I realize that that was a dissociative um, survival mechanism, right? To kind of zone out and pretend like none of it was happening. Um, but being absolutely terrified by it. But there was nothing I could do. You know, at 6, I was kind of powerless. And that threat that she held over my head, you know, it sounds really, you look back on it as an adult and it seems ridiculous, right? How on earth did I believe that a 10-year-old would have the power to do something like that? Kill my dog, kill my parents. But when you're 6, you're so susceptible to what you're told. You know, and I remember one day we were out in my backyard, and so we had this little teeny tiny patch of grass and then a big strip of concrete that was like the walkway. And she had a water bottle and she sprayed on the water on the sidewalk with the water bottle, "Holly, the devil will get you." And another time when she chased me around my kitchen and I was like leaping on the counters trying to get away from her. And she threatened me that, you know, demons would come in the middle of the night and stick me, poke me with needles if I ever slept with my arm outside the covers. And again, these things seem ridiculous now from a grown up lens, but when you look at it from a 6-year-old lens, it's really terrifying. And, you know, I believe that. And those threats are what kept me compliant, even when, you know, I was terrified out of my mind. You know, I flinched one time and she chased me up the stairs with a butcher knife. And she held me down. And I remember I'm on this scratchy velour chair. And she's over me and she's got my knees pinned up to my chest. And she's got the knife sticking in my stomach. And I feel it draw a little blood. And she says, "Don't ever run from me. You know what I will do to you." And so, you know, at that moment, her threats were not idle threats. You know, there was a real threat right there. There was blood on my stomach. It was a little bit, but it was a trickle, and it was enough to go, okay, she means what she's saying.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Um. Wow. Um. Are you comfortable with talking about in depth what you went through, or because I want to know my boundaries too?
You bet. I mean, it's all it's all in my book that I
Okay.
just published secondhand worth. So it's all out there. There are no secrets anymore. And my philosophy really is God brought me through all of this stuff, not to torture me or
Hmm.
just to make me stronger, right? But He brought me through this so I could help other people. So if my story can help another person because of my vulnerability and openness, I'm all for it. So you can ask me anything.
Love it. And we're helping others through life experiences. So
Mm-hmm.
I love it. So I want the audience to see, because I want like transparency on this, because they're always like, how can with another woman violating another woman, or
Mm-hmm.
young taking advantage, a female on a female,
Mm-hmm.
how can that happen? Can you talk about some of the things that she made that happen, or she made you do?
Sure. There may be more. There are big black holes in my memory, and I realize that that's the nature of traumatic memories, right? It's kind of like this slideshow, and I know that there's a lot of extra footage on the cutting room floor that I don't know and I don't see, and I might never. But the things that I remember were, I don't even know a better way to say this. Let's just call it what it is, but humping my leg. She at one point had like spread herself around mine, you know, um, and humping me. And so that is like the biggest thing that I remember her doing. I don't remember any like penetration, um, except for that time that I flinched and she chased me up the stairs and put a butcher knife in my stomach. Um, that's the one time that I remember like her exploring with her fingers. Um, but that's kind of what I remember. It was more like her like getting off on me.
Understood.
Yeah.
Now, did you have any? Well, no, you said that you didn't because you were kind of scared of what she might do. Um, I had a question, and where did it go? Uh, I'm sorry. Um, Now, with the, I guess the age gap, slightly, I should say,
Mm-hmm.
um, do you think that she kind of maybe purposely, kind of sought you out to be friends with, or maybe it was just more like a cognitive level? Do you think that you guys just kind of meshed well on a cognitive level based on whatever she was going through? She might, it could have been something loose up there, but do you think, it was, even though the ages were young, do you think you were, targeted in a sense?
I've wondered that. And I've wondered if, because there were two other girls in this little like block that we played in the alley. And one was a year younger and one was 2 years younger than me. And I've always wondered, like, did anything happen with them? Did they get taken down into Lisa's basement? And I don't know. I was, of the kids that played there, I was the closest girl to her age. And maybe that's why it was me. And maybe it wasn't just me. I don't know. I'm kind of not hoping, right? That's the wrong word. But anticipating if one of these girls maybe reads my book and would contact me and say, oh my gosh, that was me too, I wouldn't be surprised by it, right? I'm connected with one of them on Facebook, so it's a possibility that that might happen. But, I don't know. I don't know. It wouldn't surprise me if there were other people, but maybe it was just me because I was the closest to her age. That's a great question.
And I have just a small follow-up. Now, based on what you told me, just kind of how she was able to manipulate the situation,
Mm-hmm.
it just reminds me of something. Have you ever watched Abducted in Plain Sight?
No, I haven't.
You should. Now, granted, it might be triggering.
Mm-hmm.
Situation is completely different, but pretty much her abductor, which was the next door neighbor, was able to do things to her, making her believe, drugging her, making her believe she was in a spaceship. Somebody speaking to her, like an alien speaking to her, I will harm your family, I will do this, I will do that. So
wow.
It's very, very easy, especially at that age, to be, manipulated, especially if you think someone else is going to get hurt in the matter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, was there any, I don't know, like, was there ever a time you all were ever caught that by adults? Did anybody ever have any inkling? Were there any close calls? Like anybody was there to help at all?
Yeah, the closest time that I can remember was a time that she freaked out on me in my bedroom. We were at my house this time. And, a lot of times when these incidents would start, she would get this like gravelly voice and I'm gonna get you kind of thing. So she started with that. And I was like, no, 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 no. This is only supposed to be at your house, right? Not mine. Mine is the safe house. Not supposed to happen here. And she chased me and I ran into my brother's room and I, closed myself in his closet, but it's one of these sliding doors. So I'm like jamming myself between like the door that's banging on my back and then my feet were propped and wedged against the door frame. And she's like trying to bang this door open. And I screamed and my mom came in and she said, Lisa, I think it's time for you to leave. And I remember just silently begging my mom, please see. Please see. But of course, I had set it up so she wouldn't see. I became the protector of the family in this like kind of inversion of the relationship. I had become the protector. I was sacrificing to protect them. And I did everything I could in my power so she couldn't see. And so that was the closest I think that we ever came to being like found out. But for whatever reason, my mom just, thought we were playing. Maybe she thought we got out of hand and, kids start to fight or whatever. And she just said, Lisa, it's time for you to leave. And that was the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I wrote it down too. I was going to ask where were her parents at? Like,
no, they were always working.
Oh, that's why. That probably was another issue. So she was home alone a lot.
She was home alone a lot. Mm-hmm.
Wow,
Yeah.
wow. So how long did you go through this? And when you separated from her, how did you separate from her? How did you get away?
Mm-hmm. Well, I wish I could say that, I stood up for myself and finally told somebody and whatnot. But the truth is that we moved 30 minutes away. And so it was physically impossible. Like we just didn't see each other anymore. And that's how it ended. So, that's it. I just moved.
So if you want to move, it probably would have still been going on.
Probably. And I was 12 at the time. So who knows? Probably. For who knows how long.
Goodness. Now, when you moved, was it like old habits died hard? Did you kind of find yourself into similar situations, just kind of based on, not that you were seeking it, but it seems as though when we have these conversations with people, they are easy to kind of like sniff out. It seems like they have been, repeat either victims or offenders of certain things. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So did you, find yourself into any other situations once you were able to move away from that one?
Yes. So I would say I had two big relationships in high school that were like normal. And then at 16, I started dating a guy who I thought was 4 years older than me, ended up being 8 years older than me. And that was a very abusive relationship. So emotionally abusive, threatening, calling me selfish whenever I didn't want to do whatever he wanted me to do. And I feel like I compromised every little bit of myself in that relationship. And it started small, like ignoring the bong that I found in his house. And, let's just say it, ignoring the fact that he was 8 years older than me. And then into, manipulating me into watching movies that I felt distinctly uncomfortable watching and that no 16-year-old should ever see, right? And ended up, I realized later, when I was in college and we had broken up, we did it for about 3 years. And I would say the first year was really good. And then in the second year is when everything started changing. But I realized in college, after a women's studies class, that all of those times where, I was crying in the bathroom afterwards and was like, I'm so selfish, I can't believe this, that they weren't just me being selfish, but they were actually me being raped by him. And I didn't see that because, you think once consent, always consent, right? I had consented the first time. I even asked for it the first time. I'm the one who initiated it. And he was like, are you sure? And I was like, yes. So I figured it couldn't be rape because, I had consented once. So everything else after that, it goes, right? And so it took me years after the relationship to realize just how toxic it was. And then after that, I ended up in an abusive marriage for 5 years. So yeah, I'm very typical in having a string of abusive relationships. And now I'm married to a man. I've been married to him for 20 years this June, and he's wonderful and it's healthy and it's great. But it took a lot of healing and work on my part to be able to accept a healthy love. Because if I had met my current husband years ago before I did, I wouldn't have respected him because I didn't respect myself and I didn't love myself. And I thought that the love that I was getting from these other guys was right and healthy and what I deserved. And so, it took a lot of healing and work to get myself to a point where I could actually accept and want, be attracted to a man who was going to be healthy for me.
Okay. Wow. So, your relationship going, because we also like to show the transparency of that as well. What was the extent of the abuse? Was it physical, financial, verbal, emotional? And probably what is one of the most, uncomfortable ways that he was treating you that allowed you to see that you were going through that abuse?
Well, with the guy in high school, his name was Chuck. His was mostly emotional. And so it was manipulation and guilt into getting me into these compromising situations. And then with my ex-husband, it was verbal abuse, emotional abuse, sort of financial, I had full access to the money in my account, in our joint bank account, but it was drilled into my head. Now there's a little bit of spiritual abuse here too from a culty church that we were a part of that drilled in the notion of women submitting to your husbands, ignoring the whole rest of the passages about how husbands are supposed to love their wives and lay down their lives for them, right? And be the self-sacrificial person in the relationship. They focused it all on the woman. And so to be a good wife, I couldn't go against what he said. And so when he refused to buy a vacuum cleaner, for instance, I was stuck vacuuming the entire house, all of our carpets with a shop vac. And it took forever. It was really painful because they're not designed to be, run across carpet. But I had to be the good wife. And I couldn't defy him, even though I had the money in the bank account and I had a debit card and I could go and buy the stupid vacuum cleaner. That would have compromised my spirituality and good wife status. So I couldn't do it. And so with him, my ex-husband, it wasn't so much, there was no rape there, like with Chuck, but he systematically shred every scrap of self-esteem that I ever managed to pull together. Because I already obviously felt crappy about myself. I already felt worthless and unlovable because of what Lisa had done and my other, experiences with Chuck. But every time I tried to, pull myself together and be a little bit more confident and be a little more secure and feel a little bit better about myself, he just cut me down with words that, I describe it in my book as like he punched a canyon into my soul. And each one of his words was a blow, like a physical blow. And I really came out of that relationship feeling like I was broken beyond repair, because he just beat me down so much, made me feel completely worthless, completely incapable of doing anything. I couldn't make any decisions. And that's where I became codependent. So I will own that part of, my response in becoming codependent and giving up that power to him to make every decision for our lives. And I remember one time I was standing in the grocery store in the peanut butter aisle, and I took like an 8-ounce jar of peanut butter off the shelf, and I looked at it and I put it back, and I got the 12-ounce jar and I looked at it for 10 minutes. I couldn't make a decision on what size peanut butter jar to buy, because if I made the wrong decision, and the right decision was always different every time in his eyes, I would get screamed at for like 10 or 15 minutes. You're so useless. You can't do anything right. And you can't even buy peanut butter and blah, 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 blah. And it was that moment where like my wake up call, right? Where I'm going, I used to be sort of confident, right? I had this grand plan for college and what I was going to do and get a master's degree and become a physical therapist. And I had it all laid out, and I did that every single step. And now I'm reduced to the point where I can't even buy peanut butter. Like, what is wrong with me? And that was the moment that I realized I'd lost myself. I'd completely lost myself. And if I didn't do something really dramatic and really soon, I might not ever find myself again. Like, it might be too late. And so that was my wake up call. I know that's a little bit more than what you asked, but just where it went.
No, we love the transparency because people really need to see, because some people don't know what their wake up calls are, or they don't even, they're like you. It's like, I'm going through this, but I've become immune, and you're shredding me, and you're shredding me, and you're shredding me, but you're so torn, you don't realize it.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then you've got these pressures, right? These pressures to conform, whether it's from the partner, or whether, like in my case, it was also from my church, that you can't speak up. And we went to counseling, right, with church leaders, and he gaslighted me, he gaslighted them, and it was all my fault. And it all came, all back to me. And he turned everything into my fault. And I really started to doubt my grasp on reality. I'm like, no, that the conversation went completely different than what he said. But how could I be so wrong? Right? Maybe it really did happen his way. How could I be so wrong? And again, I think it goes back to that, relationship with Chuck. How could I be so selfish? Right? And that manipulation and that control that he had over me. It just bled right over into my marriage. I didn't see it for a long time because it's, what I had been through for years of my life.
Absolutely. Now, what caused that one to kind of come to a head? When did you, have that realization that I'm just done with it? We're not doing this anymore. If there was a, specific moment that you can remember.
Yeah. Well, I never actually came to the realization that I'm done and I can't do this anymore and we're done. Again, I was trying to be the good wife, the good Christian, and I wouldn't divorce him. But I had started after that peanut butter moment, that's when I really started to go after all of my own healing. Now, I had done a lot of healing work in college from the childhood stuff, from Lisa, from Chuck. I'd done a lot of healing work around that abuse, but I had never really found myself again, right? Because you lose yourself to these demands of other people. You lose yourself to the trauma. You start to doubt yourself and not know who you are anymore. And I had never filled that gap in my life. And I think that that is a lot of what allowed, that relationship with my ex-husband to come about, me to be attracted to him in the first place. And so that's where I really went after my own healing journey and rediscovering who I was, learning boundaries. I didn't even know what they were. My friend, I'm telling my best friend something that he did, and she goes, "It sounds like you need some boundaries." And I looked at her and I said, "What are those?" I had literally never heard the word before. And like I said, my boundaries were obliterated before they could even be formed because of Pine Tree and Lisa. And so that's what I really started to lean into, those boundaries. I will leave the house if you yell at me like this, if you don't stop yelling. I can't control his behavior, but I can control my response to it. So I will leave. And I did. I left when he started yelling. And when I started standing up for myself, things got worse. Things got worse. I would love to say they all got peachy and better and he saw the error of his ways, but we know that's not how it works, right? With most of these people. He doubled down. He doubled down, and the insults got worse. The control got worse. The put downs got worse. Everything. And I had just decided, I'm not going to let you control me anymore. I'm going to stand up for myself. I'm going to put these boundaries in place, whether you like them or not. And so, I put up with a lot more verbal abuse after that, until one day I walked into the living room and he was using our big TV as a computer monitor right in the living room. So his computer is hooked up to it, as a monitor. And the Arizona divorce statutes were on the TV screen, like really big, because it's a big TV. And I asked him why he was looking at that. And he told me with, all the emotion, as if he had said, the sun is shining in Phoenix. He said, this anniversary will be our last. I want a divorce. And part of me was completely crushed and terrified and had no idea how I would survive and what I would do. And then that little part of me that was beginning to wake up had a spark of hope. Like, oh, I'm being rescued. Because I don't know that I would have had the conviction to file for divorce. I was so broken at that time. I don't know that I would have. And so it was, very mixed bag. That terrified, that fear, that devastation, but also mixed with relief that, I'm going to be free from this.
Wow, that's powerful. That's really powerful. Were you able to get some of your money back since y'all had a joint account? I hope you were able to, like, you're not taking all my money, just my money in this account.
Right. Yeah, I gave up way more than my fair share of things in that divorce. But gaining my freedom was worth more than any of it. More than the retirement account, more than the equity in the house, more than any of, the furniture that we had, because most of it was his. He had systematically gotten rid of everything that I brought into the marriage and replaced with his antiques, because he was the designer. He was the architect. He knew design. I didn't. I was just some know nothing, whatever. I don't know. So there was very little of me in that house anyway. I didn't want most of it. And like I said, from a monetary perspective, I gave up more than my fair share. But to get the divorce finalized faster without bringing in lawyers, and dragging this thing out forever, I prioritized my freedom over finances. So I walked away with some, I walked away with some equity from the house. I walked away with money to pay off some of our joint debt. I walked away with, some of the furniture and my stuff, but the freedom that I got was worth more than anything that I left behind. But the funny thing is, we went on this cruise. We had decided to go on this cruise for our 5th anniversary. I don't know, 8 months before he decided he wanted a divorce, and it was coming up. And I said, you're going to give me my money back for this, because we, both of our monies paid for the cruise. Are you going to pay me half of the money for this thing? And he goes, no. And I go, okay, well then I'm going. He's like, what? Like, he did not expect that at all. He expected me to capitulate, to bow down, to give in to him like I had done, for the whole 5 years of our marriage. And I said, no, I'm going to go. If you can't give me my money back or won't give me my money back, I'm going to go. And so we stayed in the same cabin because we didn't have a choice, right? You can't exactly sleep on the Lido deck. And we ate dinner together in the dining room, because I was not about to go to the cafe every night when I could have steak and lobster in the dining room. And everybody else is celebrating marriages and divorces, or marriages and anniversaries. And we're like celebrating our divorce. Right? And I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to keep my own schedule. I'm going to go on my own excursions. That was like my coming out party. I was the only invitee and the guest of honor all rolled into one. And I'm so glad I did that. That was really one of the first steps of me taking myself back and saying, you're not gonna steamroller over me, and you're not gonna control my life anymore. My mom was convinced he was going to throw me overboard. She was like, I prayed for you every night.
Valid concern to have.
Right? My friends thought I was crazy, but I'm like, no, I'm doing this.
Absolutely. Yes, ma'am. Now, how were you able to take that experience and experiences before that and kind of turn it into, rediscover radiance? How did that come about? Where did the, idea come from? And yeah, how'd you get started?
Yeah. So like I said, I've long known that I didn't go through all these experiences just for my own sake, to torture me or to make me some stronger person, that there was, a reason why. And I wasn't really sure what form that would take. I've been doing a lot of speaking, and I started out talking to moms groups and realizing that, moms lose themselves to the demands of motherhood just as much as people lose themselves to the demands of an abusive relationship. And not that parenthood is an abusive relationship by any means, but still all the sacrifices that they make and putting themselves last. And then they turn around and they look in the mirror and they go, who am I? Right? And so those experiences, though, while I have them, are really unique. Like, I don't know anybody else that grew up in a nudie camp and, all of this stuff. The impact that it had on me is not unique. The impact that it had on me is almost universal. And the more I got speaking to people, the more I realized that sense of losing yourself is almost universal. And realizing, what I had gone through and what steps I took, when I analyzed what steps I took to get there and to find myself again, to find my voice, to find my confidence, to rediscover who I was, I realized that that was my mission, to help other women find themselves again, to rediscover that spark, that confidence. And as I was starting this healing journey, so I don't know if I was still married to John at the time or not, but a friend's husband pulled me aside one day and he says, do you have a minute for me to, encourage you? I go, okay, who can say no to that? And so he said, you can look in the mirror and know that you're a beautiful woman, which I did not believe at the time. But he said, you now are like a completely different woman that I have never seen before. You are positively radiant. Something has changed within you. And that stuck with me because I know that I had been changing so much on the inside and learning to love and trust myself again and find out who I was and stand up for myself. But I had no idea that those changes were so visible on the outside too. And so, as I started my company and started growing and thinking about branding and, going from just Holly Doherty to an actual business name and entity, that conversation came back up, and I was like, radiance. I want women to remember and rediscover their radiant selves, because it's in there. It's in every single one of us. And it gets buried by life experiences. It gets buried by trauma. It gets buried by disappointment and failure. But it's still there inside every single one of us. And I want every single woman to rediscover that about themselves. And so that's where Rediscover Radiance came from.
Love it. So, how long of a break did you take before you got with your husband? How did you meet your husband?
Okay, not long. So we had actually met while I was still married. Um, uh, we were both, it's a little complicated. We were both singing on the praise team in our church, but our church was split up into different geographical regions. Every once in a while, we'd all meet together as one big church. And so it was one of these congregational citywide things. And I was there singing, warming up, and he was there. And he had this really bright tenor voice and these gorgeous blue eyes. And I've never seen him before. And, it was required. And like I said, it was this culty church, right? We were required to give each other like this little side hug, like don't touch your boobs to his chest or he'll start lusting after you kind of hug. And the moment we touched, it was like sparks, electricity. I got to leave. I got to get away from this guy. And so I muttered something about, oh yeah, my husband's a tenor too. And he looked all shocked and we just like went our separate ways. Didn't see each other until the day I got my divorce papers in the mail. And that was my 30th birthday on the day. And the church was having this Valentine's Day mixer dance thing. And I decided to go because I love to dance. And it was either that or cry my eyes out at home. So I cried my eyes out at home and then went dancing. And he was there. And I had completely forgotten about him at that point, completely forgotten about him. But the moment I saw him, I was like, oh, it's him. It's that tenor guy. And so we started talking after the whole dance. A bunch of people were standing around talking. And just after that, we just started getting to know each other, going on some dates. And a year and maybe 15 months after my divorce was final, we got married. Right? But I really think
now
like
that's
that
a comeback.
That's a comeback.
That's a comeback right there. Yeah.
Right?
Like, you're not gonna hold me down.
Yes. Now I have a question for you personally.
Sure.
Because I do know that sometimes, after people have gone through things that you have gone through, more or less, some people don't know whether, if in moving into a healthy relationship, it's worth letting them know about, and in what capacity.
Okay.
Some people do utilize your trauma and things like that they know of as kind of a weapon towards you sometimes, or it can be used. So how, I guess, what is it in your body or your feeling or your soul, your spirit told you that, he was safe enough to express those things too? Or what would you suggest looking for somebody to know after those types of things have happened to you, who is safe to be vulnerable with?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I will say I didn't trust myself still. After that, I doubted myself 6 ways from Sunday. I doubted him. I didn't trust him for a while as much as like I was leaning into this relationship. I was fighting it at the same time. And like, take my feelings away, God, because I don't want them, right? I don't want this. It's too soon. I did a lot of therapy, right? So I got into counseling again at that point. And that helped me work through a lot of the feelings and thoughts that I had. But it took me a long time to like really trust him. And he kind of knew my story, because in this like culty church, again, no secrets, no boundaries, a lot of control. So he kind of knew the story. to begin with. At least the John part of the story, that I was just freshly divorced and it wasn't a good relationship and whatnot. So that kind of made it easier to open the door when I was ready to tell him about some of these other things. It really took a lot of work leaning into, like you asked, what I feel in my body or what I felt in my body. I didn't feel anything in my body for the longest time because I had suppressed that from the time I was 6, right? That's one of my survival mechanisms, was suppressing what I felt in my body, because what I felt in my body was run away, but I couldn't, because it would have gotten me killed or my dog killed. I flinched and I got a knife in my stomach. So how can I run away and survive? So I suppressed a lot of what I felt in my body. One of the things that helped me get in touch with those feelings again was movement, dance for me. Just leaning into moving my body and feeling safe inside my body. And as I was able to do that, I was able to tap into, how does this feel? Do I get a pit in my stomach? Do I get like a tightness in my chest? And I started feeling that way more and more and more toward the controls that were imposed on me by the church, and going, this is not healthy. This is not safe. This is going beyond the boundaries of what's appropriate. And realizing, okay, I'm feeling this over here. Am I feeling this with this guy? And it was really interesting because there was a juxtaposition of this guy, his name is Irish, and this other guy. And we were dating, like, just casual friendship kind of dating, not like serious romantic kind of dating. But I was hanging out with this guy a lot and his friends, and hanging out with Irish a lot. And I noticed that this other guy, we had a dinner date at his house. And he was like, okay, put your shoes over here, but not on the floor, put them on the shoe rack. And then the next couple that came in, he was like, okay, put your shoes next to these shoes. So he's being really controlling, like something really simple, right? But it starts pinging my alarm bells and going, oh, this is what I used to be attracted to. This I would have in the past go, look at his conviction, look at his passion, look at his confidence, right? And been attracted to that. And on the other side, I've got Irish, who's like driving across town to pick me up for a date, even if we were going back onto his side of town to hang out, and just sacrificing for me and serving me and being so kind that I was really able to see the difference and feeling like, okay, this guy is setting off my alarm bells. Not all is right in the state of Denmark here. And then versus Irish, who's treating me like a queen, and leaning into that is safe, right? That is okay. Where before I wouldn't have respected that, right? But because of all the healing and going through everything, and then again, seeing that juxtaposition between those two guys, it became really obvious.
Love it. Okay, so we are at time.
Okay.
I'm gonna close. I'm gonna ask questions. We're gonna close it out. But thank you so much. We really appreciate you being a guest. I want you to give, if you can give advice to the guests, one thing that helped you on your journey to healing.
Thank you so much, first, for having me. It's been a pleasure. It's been so much fun. One thing to start your healing journey, I would say, is take those steps to rediscover who you are at your core. Tap into that small voice inside of you that's still there, that little spark of you. Remember the things that light you up. Remember the things that you enjoy, that you used to be known for, are known for, want to be known for, right? What is it that makes you you? Strip off all the lies that other people have put on you, that you've come to believe about yourself from other people. head on confront those lies, dismantle them one by one by reminding yourself of the truth. And in that, you will discover who you're not and who you are. And that is one of the biggest steps toward healing, because if you don't know your self-worth, nothing else matters. And if you don't know who you are, then you can't really be whole and heal.
Wonderful words to live by. Thank you so much for that. Now, we do like to call this part shameless plug. You see all your information scrolling along the bottom here. You can let our viewers know what you have going on currently. If you have to draw traffic to anything, any merch you have for sale, anything you want to draw attention to, you do have the floor.
Great. Well, thank you. If you want to know more about my journey and my story and all the nitty-gritty details, you can go and get my book. It's at secondhandworth.com, secondhandworth.com. And that'll take you right to the Amazon link, so you don't have to like hunt and find it. And then if you want to know another step, a really simple step to take on your healing journey, I invite you to pick up my free gift, which is called the self-worth key, or the confidence key, the confidence key. And it is at rediscoverradiance.com/key, rediscoverradiance.com/key. And you'll learn the secret that 3-year-olds have mastered and grown women forget when it comes to being confident. And it'll teach you a lifelong habit that you can develop that will build your confidence every single day.
Okay, you heard it right there, Holly. I want to thank you, and thank you for supporting Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast and The Good Fight, which is an extension, our nonprofit. So definitely come support our cause. We appreciate anything. I hope everyone has gotten or learned someone that is going through what Holly has been through, that you can connect to her life experience, and it may help you start the journey to healing. We feel these things, we go through these things, and you may be a person that is going through this, or you may have a friend that is going through this, and hopefully Holly's life experience will help you realize that you can heal, and some of the things that she used to grow and help her, you can use those tools. So we want to thank you for tuning in to Unfiltered Unspoken Podcast. We're going to continue to share life experience. Ain't that right, Sid?
That's right.
That's right. They can't mess with us. Peace.